Welcome to the Hardwood Hustle, powered by PGC Basketball. We believe in the value of a coach. We're here to educate, empower, and encourage you to lead like never before. This week, we have a conversation with Mark Jarram, former college and professional basketball coach and now head of coaching and performance development at Loughborough University. In this episode, we discuss 4 areas of opportunity to help coaches reach their potential. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Hardwood Hustle. I think we've got a really interesting show for you today. A really interesting guest who's a longtime friend of Sam and I's, been a PGC coaching member. And if you've ever been on any of our calls, you know that his wisdom and insight is really deep and really profound. He's a lifelong learner. He's coached both in college and professional, coached in college over here. Now he's in the United Kingdom, where he coaches in college and has coached professionally as well over there, and recently made a shift. He made a shift to the head of coaching and performance development at the college, which is an interesting shift where we don't necessarily have that spot too often. And I know prior, y'all didn't have that spot. You created it, and I love the spot. But he's been at Loughborough and at college and worked with the pro team there. Mark Jarram, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. It's an honor and a privilege. This Hardwood Hustle has definitely been a big piece to my journey, and all the conversations over the years I've enjoyed. But just celebrate you guys for continually evolving and growing and serving the way that you guys do. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that, and I'm really excited for our listeners here because, you know, I think it's also common for us to be in the weeds. Like when we're coaching, we are totally in the weeds. We're just buried in our job, our team, what we have to do to win. And I love the thought by Andy Stanley I heard a long time ago is that, you know, at least once a year, you should fire yourself and you should just step back and say, gosh, if I was to take this job tomorrow and I was to step into it, what would I do different? And so many times it's just almost virtually impossible to see it when you're in it. And I love your new position because now you're working with coaches throughout your college and you're helping them to understand how to be higher performers, how to get better development and better performance from the players. So you're coaching the coaches now, and you've learned some really interesting things. We're going to narrow it down to 4 things that are good learnings, cornerstones, things that you think are most impactful to running a good program. So a coach listening can step back and say, all right, look, if I was to fire myself and I was to take a job today, what things do I really need to focus on? What should my cornerstones be? What are the things that are really going to drive performance and winning within my program? So why don't you kick us off with the first one?
Yeah, well, to be honest, TJ, it was really, really difficult to choose these 4 things. And it's a really hard thing to do when there's so many contributing factors to the journey. And like you talked about, when you're in the weeds and you're in the thick of it, you're in the hamster wheel of coaching, it is often tough to sit and reflect and figure out, you know, and navigate the complexities of coaching. But yeah, just kind of 4 massive learnings. The first one is truly having a growth mindset. And I kind of break it down into 3 phases of that, really. And the first phase is you and like your relationship with growth mindset. And it's authentically like the curiosity you have, the open-mindedness you have, the hunger to learn, and not just talking about it, but really being about it, like actually following through and pursuing some growth-related opportunities, and, you know, just seeing different things in your world, outside of your world, in your bubble, outside of your bubble. So I would say that's the first phase of it. Then the second phase would be just trying stuff, like actually being brave. And we talk to a lot of my coaches about that. Like failure doesn't really exist, especially in a developmental environment. And we get that, you know, there's pressures of performance and there's outcome goals related, but like be super brave, steal stuff, adapt stuff, be good, do a good job of filtering it. I think that's really important. You know, we fall into the trap of coaches of seeing something like whoever wins the NCAA tournament, we often, you know, there's a pattern of that's the next thing or that's the next trend. So just being mindful of that and making sure that whatever you do expose yourself to, it fits your world, it fits your personality, it fits your style. So don't fall into that trap. And then I'd say the last phase of it is the so what, now what phase. So it's really tough to go against the grain, and it's really tough to do things different to like your neighbors or other coaches and colleagues. But figuring out, that conflict between how does society measure your success versus what you truly value. Can you identify the need for change? That's a big one that I work with my coaches a lot. And then other aspects like how do you use athlete feedback in order to create change? Something we often don't do, but just identifying key areas. So the so what, now what, that last phase is, yes, have a growth mindset, but really do something about it. And to be honest, that's where the Key 5 blueprint has been a great navigation tool for me. And I'm not scared to say I've adapted it for some of our coaches here and used it well.
Yeah, Mark, those are some really good things right there you unpack. Let's go back towards the front of your comments, which is, the growth mindset, the open-mindedness, and, I assume, when you refer to growth mindset, Carol Dweck was a psychologist who brought this to life in her book Mindset. And if you haven't read that and you're listening right now, immediately order that and read that. If you're a coach, a parent, a leader, highly, highly recommend it. But maybe, Mark, if you could just boil it down to some tangible things for, a coach listening is like, yeah, I want to be open-minded, but what pitfalls, my question is, what pitfalls do you see coaches fall into on the fixed mindset piece versus like what is some tangible ways that they can grow in being growth-minded in their approach to coaching and leading, kids, staff, and everybody?
Yeah, it's a great question because you got to think like what are the sources to creating that behavior of actually being open-minded. And I think it's easy for coaches to just be in their own world and be blinkered. So I would say the first part of it is, what are you actually exposing yourself to? So I think some of the most well-rounded people are those that travel a lot because they're exposed to different cultures, different people, different mindsets, all of that good stuff. So within your world, do you stay within your world, or do you actually experience something different, which just genuinely forces you to open your mind? So I often encourage coaches, like, where are you seeking a different environment? Where are you getting a different view or a different perspective? And if you put yourself in those positions, it automatically forces a bit of open-mindedness.
Yeah, I got a couple follow-ups for you here, Mark. Like, one, why do you think coaches stay with a fixed mindset? Like, what is the reason that you find, and especially the coaches you're coaching, and you've been on every end of it. You've been an assistant coach, head coach, college, you've been pro, you've been exposed to so many different levels, and you work with so many different coaches. Why do so many coaches stay with a fixed mindset? What's the blockage from getting them past that?
Doing the same thing for a long period of time, I think, is one threat of staying in a fixed mindset. But you just talked about it there, TJ. I've been fortunate enough to play so many different roles and having to wear so many different hats. So for me, that created a need for change. So I think that's a key thing. Like, coaches genuinely have to see a need for change in order to pursue a need for change. So I think being able to identify some of that stuff is a starting point, where if you're not even interested in figuring what some of those things are, then you're just going to sit and do the same thing that you always have done. Right? You've used the term previously about, are you doing, one season 100 times, or are you doing one season at a time and evolving and growing? And I think that's a really key aspect for coaches to understand.
Yeah, and I personally never understood that. I feel like coaching would be really boring, not growing, not learning, like not going to that place. But I think some people just love being in their comfort zone. Like, I do what I know and I don't really expand outside of that. But the problem with that is you're probably missing on really taking your team to the next level, or expanding, or taking your coaching to the next level, which I think is something that coaches miss out on. Like, you have a chance to get better, to grow, and to make your team better if you're willing to learn. Let's talk about the second part of that, Eric, about this. This is, I think, the next roadblock. I really like your ordering to this, is like being brave. Like, where does the fear come from? Like, why do you think coaches are fearful of actually implementing and trying new things? Where do you think that the source of that fear comes from?
Well, a lot of it is that fear of failure, right? And can you be aligned and in a place or a program where you're that connected with either, your line manager, whether that's a program manager or an athletic director, where you're given the freedom to try different things, and that can show itself in so many different ways. But I think the fear of, like, what's this going to mean for me? People's jobs are on the line, and that's something that we do have to consider. I joke to be like, when you're at college coaching, your job is in the hands of 18 to 22-year-olds, which for some coaches is quite scary, and for high school coaches it's even younger. But if you create the right environment, then you're able to put yourself in a position to be brave. But you've really got to put yourself out there, and that's where it comes back to, like, have a growth mindset. Don't see failure as a threat, like, embrace it. Take it as something that can make you better, which ultimately can make your program better, can make your athletes better, and just seeing it as an opportunity. And that's, like, it's all about your relationship with this term, growth mindset.
Yeah, and being brave is something that, on the other side of brave is oftentimes the breakthrough for your team or for you and your coaching and whatever. And and I've been there before. I think all coaches have been there. It's like, gosh, do I try this? Do I not try this? Now, how do you balance that? Like, a coach, I look back at my first couple of years of coaching, and I tried everything and was good at nothing. You know what I mean? Like, so that can be the opposite. How do you balance that, where I do attempt new things, I am brave, and I do make sure that I'm not just going to be stagnant in what I'm doing, with also being consistent?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to make huge changes. Like, you don't want to make overnight changes, right? Because most people are scared of change. So you bring up a great point. So it's just incremental, intentional change. So small adaptations, small tweaks, layering stuff up, and just figuring out, like, what is this something that works for us and our program? Is it something that works for me and my ability to deliver it? So I think there's a competency piece in there as well. But the reality is, if you don't try something new, then you've got nothing to review. So you have to try something and fully commit to that, so that then you have something to say, yeah, yes, it worked. No, it didn't. Here's the reasons why. But if you're not even open to trying any of that stuff, then what are we reviewing?
Yeah. And, the interesting thing about being brave, I know we spent a lot of time on this one, but tell me a great leader or a great athlete, a great player, a great competitor that at some point didn't get really brave. I mean, when you look at guys like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, just a Larry Bird, like whoever, Dame Lillard comes to mind, like they were brave, like they put themselves out there. And I think the same is true in coaching. When you look back on, Popovich kind of went against the grain and things he did. Kerr does different things than other people do. Phil Jackson with the whole mindset stuff versus just coaching basketball. Like, they tried things that could have fallen on deaf ears, when Phil Jackson handed a book to Michael Jordan to read and said, "Hey, I want to develop your mind and I want to go through." That could have been like, "Oh, I ain't doing that." But there's this little step of faith where you just say, "I'm going to be brave." And I don't know many people that have been successful or wildly successful that don't have moments of insane courage where they show a lot of bravery. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, 1,000%, right? And I think we're at the point now where, you talked about some great leaders there in, like, Popovich, and I think he has a great understanding of knowing and growing your people. But I think he's awesome at being able to identify things at such a quick speed, and, like, what's the need of my athletes right now. He's able to do that super fast, and he's now, in my opinion, he is sciencing the art of coaching. So that's when you get to a mastery level like he is.
Yeah, that's really good. All right, real quickly, just tell us about So What, Now What, and then we'll move on to the next one. But why is this one important, and how does that play out for a coach?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I talked about in the first phase. It's easy to talk about it, but the so what now what is to do something about it. So all the interventions that we're doing with the coaches, I try to have them at least leave with a form of commitment. So we can get together and talk coaching, and everyone says, "Hey, it was a great conversation," but now what? What are you going to do with it? How is this actually going to impact your coaching? What is the actual change we're going to see? And getting them down to that layer. So what is it you're actually going to do differently? And I think a practical example for the listeners is, if we use something like the Key 5 blueprint, color code it. So have things on there that are just your typical red, amber, green ranking. Like green is something that you do really well, that you're comfortable with. Amber is something that you're identifying needs to be better. Red is something that you recognize as a weakness and maybe need a bit more urgency. And I've now incorporated a blue as well, which is kind of like a superpower. So we're working with that with some of the coaches, but that should be the catalyst for follow-up conversations. And that's my role, is I'm planting seeds a lot with the coaches to create the opportunity for a follow-up. And that's something that we're really passionate about here at Loughborough.
Yeah, well, before we move on to the second one, because there's a lot to unpack in the growth mindset right there, but you might want to share with our listener, what is amber? That's a certain type of color here. Is that yellow?
Yeah, sorry. Amber is your yellow. You're at the traffic lights and you're unsure whether to go or not.
Gotcha. Okay, let's move on to the second one here.
Yeah, second one is I labeled it as the comparison conflict, and I think this is one that a lot of coaches will be able to relate to as we unpack it. But comparison is a thief of joy. We've all heard that quote and we all love it. And I frame it in this way. It's like, think of a personal relationship in your life, somebody who's near and dear to you, might be husband or wife. You wouldn't leave in the morning and say, "Hey, I hope you have a really good day today, but not as good as mine." Right? We hope that nobody would say that. And then think of a professional relationship. You wouldn't say to that person, "I hope you have a great day today, but not as good as mine." But the sad thing is that actually happens. That happens in sports. It happens in teams where people are saying, "Look, I hope you play really well today, but not as good as me," because people are always thinking, for the most part, sometimes about themselves. So there's a comparison conflict in there, and there's pressures of wins and losses and outcomes and stuff. But for me, we should be measuring against potential. That's something that I'm passionate about. Are these people, are these teams, are these programs meeting their potential? So everybody matures in some ways with this comparison conflict, but I don't think you should compare yourself to other coaches, because everybody matures at different stages. You're exposed to different things at different times. And it's just been one for me that I think early on in my journey, I definitely compared myself to other coaches, which isn't always healthy. And as I've matured, I've come away from that. And that comes with a level of, clarity in yourself, who you are as a coach, what your philosophies are, and all of that good stuff. But yeah, it's something that I think many coaches will be able to relate to, and something you got to try to avoid the best you can.
And Mark, that goes back to what you kind of mentioned early in the conversation, which is define your own success, right? You said something along the lines of, there's the world's definition of success, but there's a lot of truth in what you just said, which is the coach who's 28 years old and just took over first year program. If that coach is comparing herself or himself to the 48-year-old coach who's won multiple championships and 300 games and been coaching for 20 years, you're probably going to be left feeling not enough a lot of days, because your measurement of success is through the lens of someone else. And so but in competitive athletics at the higher levels, there is a scoreboard that in some regard, everybody's getting measured by that scoreboard. But I guess my question is speaking into just what questions do we ask ourselves on the front end so that we avoid the comparison and we are aligning ourselves in the right direction.
Yeah, Sam, it's a great point in like what are you comparing yourself to? So I think you need to create as a coach, like what's your framework? What's your review process? What's the actual things that you're going to be held accountable to? That's like personally, but then also the broader, like as a team, as a program, etc. So create something. Otherwise, again, what are we reviewing? But what we have to be careful of is in that comparison piece is you're only getting a snapshot of whoever you're comparing yourself to. So in my role now, where I'm working across multiple sports, not just basketball, I have to be very careful that I don't bring a level of judgment into that because it's just such a snapshot of their environment. Like if I go into one training session or one practice, I shouldn't compare or judge. And it's the same for us. Like I'm not in TJ's halftime talks or his pre-game talks or how he is day to day and the messages he's transmitting to his team. So I don't truly know what his world and his environment is. So I shouldn't compare myself to TJ and the Emmanuel program because I truly don't know the ins and outs. So I think there's an element there of create a framework, but also don't fall into the trap of thinking you've seen or heard one thing and that's their truth, where actually that might not be their true reality.
Yeah. And look, this one here is, to me, when I think about this one, I think about just peace. Like, I think it's hard for coaches to have peace in what they do because it's always, what's next? How do I find a win? How do I find an edge? And a big part of that is just comparing yourself to others. And this is only getting harder because we have players living in this reality, coaches living in this reality. I think this is the reality of the world right now, right? Like with social media, everything is comparable. We see everybody's best meal. We see everybody in their best dress clothes. We see everybody on their best vacation. And we see everybody that won coach of the year and everybody that won X number of games. And like, it is really hard to fight against this. It's countercultural to not compare to everything else that's going on. But I think it's important for coaches to know, like, what's on the other side of that. If you can stay out of this trap, I think you have a little bit of an unwavering peace that most coaches don't have and might never have.
Yeah. You made me think there, TJ. There's a documentary out about like the world of influencers, and I forget what it's called, but you got to be careful because what is true reality? So there's a part of that documentary where it's an influencer saying that they're on holiday, but actually they've got a toilet seat in front of a TV screen taking a photo, which makes them look like they're on a plane. And that's a really powerful example of, don't judge every book by its cover, right? And the power of social media, which is what you alluded to there. So, yeah, I think you've got to be really careful. And I want the last point on the comparison piece is, as coaches, we hold on to so much stuff, and especially early, I can relate to that. When I was a young coach, I would gather lots of stuff and hold on to it. And I think as time goes on, like things should pass through you rather than stay with you. And that's what I really like about the PGC community and the coaching community here is like just that willingness to share. And again, that comes with clarity and comfort and knowing who you are and what you're about and stuff. But yeah, things should definitely pass through you and you should be open to sharing.
Yeah, and not by no means am I perfect at this, but I can say that I try and fight against this. Like somebody asked me the other week, hey, how many times have you won a championship or coach of the year or different things like that? And my answer, I have no idea, and how did you do back in this year, or how was this team, or I don't really know, because I do my best not to hold those things too close, and not because it's some level of humility, or just because honestly, it's because I want to fight against that trap of comparison. Because if I'm always trying to, at the end of my life, I'm going to get to this place of, yeah, I did this, I did that, I won this number of times, and I'm going to hang my hat on that. And that's not who I want to be. Now, again, not who I am all the time, because there is a level of pride in me, just like there is in everybody else. But I think intentionally fighting against that is really, really important, so that you can have peace of mind, because I know too many coaches that just don't have a good peace of mind. And I think fighting against this one will really help you have a good peace of mind. Let's move on to the third one. Let's talk about environment, Mark.
Yeah, the third one we're going to go for is something that really stuck and resonated with me, was when an NBA GM was asked, like, what's your job? What are you here for? And his response was phenomenal. He just said, I'm just here to create an environment where people can do their best work. And I was like, wow, that's such a great quote. And there's so many things that go into that. And like, in terms of the key five, like, leadership and culture building is such a foundation for all of that. And it's every day, it's all the time, it's every interaction. There's an opportunity to really build that environment where people can do their best work. And I try to source my thoughts more so from a place of, like, I get to, rather than got to. So, you wake up, oh, I've got to go to that meeting, or I've got to deal with this problem. And it's like, wow, I get to do this every day. I get to work on my culture. I get to go to this meeting and try and have a positive impact. I get to work with these incredible people. And you can just see, like, instantly there's a change of persona. But yeah, take your gratitude pills every single day. I know that's a big cornerstone for you, but pour yourself into creating an environment where people can just contribute and empower people to do so.
So, Mark, on that one, you've spent a good portion of your professional life in traditional coaching, and now you're kind of in a non-traditional role, maybe. And correct me if that's a poor definition. But I want to ask this question. So if you took back over a program tomorrow to create the environment, to your point, where people can do their best work, where players and assistant coaches, from a foundational level, what are you doing first? What's the first 7 days of your job look like? Are having vision and values? Like, do you have 5 pillars, or are you going a different direction? What do you walk us through that?
Yeah, get into the nitty gritty of it, right, Sam? That's what we want. I think there's a couple aspects, and in no particular order. I think there's something in there about absolute clarity. So we all love clarity. We all want to know what we're doing. So there's, like, seeking clarity, sharing clarity, which then kind of bleeds into alignment of some sort, like creating alignment. There's an element of casting a vision and power of purpose in there. And again, like, no particular order, it depends on your context and your environment and what your role is in terms of the steps to introducing those to the team. But yeah, there's clarity in making sure people understand, how they can contribute, where they can contribute. There's alignment and power of purpose. But I've actually got, if you give me the artistic license, just to bring power of purpose to life a little bit. And, we all steal as coaches. So this is the work of Brett Ledbetter, but he talks about, if you imagine yourself on 2 skyscrapers, right? There's 2 skyscrapers. You're stood on the edge of one of the skyscrapers, and across on the opposite skyscraper, let's say there's $1,000, £1,000, €1,000, whichever country we're in. Would you cross a plank of wood, which isn't even the width of your shoe, in order to get that money? Meaning, if you go, you're done. And most people would say no, right? Now, same skyscrapers, same exact plank of wood. Now your family's on the other side, and the only way to save your family is to cross that very same plank of wood. Who's crossing the plank of wood? And everybody's all in, right? And all we're talking about there is power of purpose. All we've done is change the reason to cross that same plank of wood. And I use that one a lot with it's quite a versatile example and an extreme example. I get that. Hopefully we're never in that scenario, but it's just to create something which gets people to like, I'm all in. I'm all in on that. I am crossing that plank of wood. It is a no-brainer. My power of purpose is that strong. And can you create one personally and professionally and within a team? Like, I think that's a really powerful example that people can definitely steal and use in their worlds.
Yeah, that is super powerful, no doubt. And, you know, I think teams that really achieve a lot have that level of purpose. You know what I mean? Again, extreme scenario, but there is something different about their why than everybody else's why. Curious to your answer to this question here. Do you think most coaches are aware of what their environment is really like? You know, like you've been around a lot of coaches and now you're helping a lot of coaches at the college, university, like figure out what's your environment like. Are most people keen to that? Do they know, do you think, or are a lot of coaches unaware of what the environment is really like?
My honest answer, TJ, is they are not fully aware. Like there's an element of I'm always asking the question of, well, how do you know? You know, I think this. Well, how do you know? It's almost like a prove it or evidence it. So I genuinely think if we fall into that trap of we see our world through our lens. How do you truly know what's going on? And I think you bring up a great point, and there's lots of different ways you can do some of that to find out your true reality. But I'm always asking the question, like when a coach says, I think I do this, or I think I coach in this way. Well, how do you know? And then we'll start unpacking that conversation and the ways to do that.
So, yeah, how do you know? I mean, are you asking players? Are you talking to assistant coaches? Are you getting an outside view? Because, you know, you can't change what you don't know. You can't change what you haven't accepted. And so I think this is a really common mistake for coaches to get into this place or this flow of like you're living between your own two ears. You got your own thoughts. You got your own vision of what's going on. And it's not actually reality to what is going on. So how do you help a coach to change? I mean, first they have to understand. So I guess how do you get them to understand that? And then what do you do once you understand?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of lends or bleeds into the fourth point, which was about self-awareness. So we can kind of go there, but yes, you want as much feedback as possible. So again, you see how everything kind of weaves together. We're back to growth mindset and open-mindedness. How can you be in a place of vulnerability in order to seek feedback, which I think is really important. So are you getting that from athletes? Are you getting that from other coaches and other members of your team? Like that could be when we say staff, you know, performance support staff as well. So it's a key contributor to giving you feedback. But how often do we, lean into them and what they're saying? And then outside of the bubble, we've all got blind spots. How are we getting somebody who is a basketball mind, is not a basketball mind, to identify blind spots? But then I think for me, one of the most powerful kind of interventions or CPD that I've ever done in order to find my true reality is just record yourself as much as possible. That was the best CPD I've ever done, was mic myself up. I had bench cam and I'm watching like, what is it actually like to be coached by me? Super vulnerable, and you hate it at first, but by far the most powerful thing, because now I'm watching what's my body language like, how am I interacting, am I actually delivering the messages I think I'm delivering, how do people respond to me, and seeing that. But yeah, absolute game changer was doing some of that type of stuff.
So let's go deeper on number 4, self-awareness, because I mean, all of them kind of hinge on self-awareness to some degree, right? Like, if you're not aware of your mindset, like what we talked about in number one is, I don't know if I'm a growth mindset, or I think I am, or I'm not even paying attention to it. Like self-awareness is so important. As we talk about, who you be, is just incredibly important versus like what you do every single day. And I think it's easy for coaches to get in the groove of, this is what I do and this is how I do it, but they're not totally aware of the repercussions or the benefits or what goes into that. So why is self-awareness so important?
I think that the self-awareness aspect is, it allows the opportunity, not guaranteed, but good self-awareness allows the opportunity for growth and improvement. Like if you truly know yourself, or you know your environment, or you can answer those like, well, how do you know type questions, then it allows the opportunity to really build it and grow it. But it's really tough to do. Like to become hyper self-aware takes an incredible amount of vulnerability. But if you get to that place, it can be really, really special. And how do you build it? Again, it comes back to like, what other things are you exposing yourself to? And I've often seeked that question. I've asked you guys the question, how do we build self-awareness? But just ask yourself, or be asked loads and loads and loads of questions. I thought, how do I try and build it in others? Just ask loads and loads and loads of questions that hopefully gets them reflecting and coaching themselves.
Yeah, Mark, I think the two big things that if we stop recording right this moment, two big themes for me I'm hearing and processing through are like what you just said, which is ask the right questions. And then two, have the humility to know that you might not have the answers to all the questions. And I think coaches, we're all have healthy egos at times. I think really good coaches, do have a confident ego to them. And ego can be a negative word. It can be a positive word too. But like confidence and humility can coexist. And I think the great coaches are confident in what they're doing, but they also have the humility to say, can we do it better? Is there a better way of doing this? What am I doing wrong? And then when you go back, I'm weaving it back to the question thing. When you ask the questions, you better be willing to accept the truth. And I'm not sure all coaches want to accept the truth because it can hurt. It bruises, it goes back, it bruises the ego. So I just think you're bringing to life some really important things here, like ask the right questions, have humility, and maybe a third is like get the right mentors, or a mentor in your life, right? Anything you want to speak to on those things?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts went to the place of coaching and leadership is so contradicting, in a sense that we say it's about others and it's about serving and it's not about you, but everything starts and stops with you. Right? From a leadership and culture standpoint, it's so contradictive. Coaching is not about you, serve others, but everything starts and stops with you. My thoughts went there, and are you aware of that and your contributions to that? Like, it's our responsibility to know that in order to try and have a positive influence on the environment and on people. But great, I mean, you nailed it there, Sam. I think you have to be thinking in that way to even allow yourself the empathy to move forwards and be better.
And self-awareness, gosh, we could stay on this one forever because I want this for people. Like I want this for coaches. Like when I think about all aspects of my life, self-awareness is just a pivotal cornerstone. If I'm trying to do well in my marriage and I'm not self-aware, I'm in trouble. Our marriage is in trouble. You know what I mean? And if I'm trying to, in my own spiritual walk, right? Like if I'm unaware and I just think I got all the answers and I think I got it all right, and I'm not, if I'm unaware of who I am and how I show up, how do I become better at my spiritual walk? And I think same thing in coaching. Like if I'm unaware or I'm not paying any attention to who I am, how I'm showing up. Like there's a ton of pitfalls that are going to happen because I just won't know it and I won't see it. And I think for coaches, self-awareness should be something you're excited about, because as soon as I realize my pitfalls as a husband, I can do better and I can be a more lovable, more enjoyable husband. Same thing as a parent, right? Like as soon as I realize all the things I'm not doing well and I'm aware that I'm not really striving or I'm not really doing or thriving in a particular area, I can become a better parent, right? And it's the same thing with coaching. The minute I recognize that, I'm not really creating a great environment. I'm not really growing. I don't have a growth mindset. Well, I can begin doing those things and my environment's going to become better. My coaching is going to become better. Like I'm going to, and so I think a lot of people, like Sam alluded to, fear that. But the reality of it is I think we should be excited about being self-aware, because on the other side of self-awareness is better. It's much better things.
I can bring it to life again for us, TJ, in talking about coaches' self-awareness, right? A study was done, like Chris Cushion, he's one of the lecturers here at Loughborough University, but he did a study where he lined up 10 coaches and he asked them, like, okay, describe yourself as a coach. What do you actually do? 2 out of 10 could accurately describe what they do as a coach. And then he went the opposite. And if you lined up 10 of your athletes and asked them the same question, can you describe your coach? Can you accurately describe your coach? 8 out of 10 could accurately do that. So there is a big, there's an alignment issue there where coaches think they coach in that way, and it comes back to, well, how do you actually know? Is that your true reality? So they called that the 80-20 split. But that's such a powerful tool of just recognizing that as coaches, we're not always, being who we think we are. So be mindful of that, but then seek out those opportunities to build your awareness.
Yeah, that's really good. Hey, Mark, where can people, if they want to learn more, where can they follow you, or how can they continue to grow from the things that you're learning?
Yeah, I'm not a huge social media guy, but I am on there. So it's at Coach Jarram, and that's both Instagram and Twitter, and people can find me on LinkedIn. That's big over here. I'm not sure how big it is in the US, but it's definitely a place to go if anybody wants to reach out.
Yeah, well, you've got a lot to offer. And one thing I've always admired about you is just your desire to grow and your desire to help coaches be better at what they do. And your own personal mindset matches up with all of these things. So, number one, being a growth mindset. 2, staying away from the comparison, the comparison conflict. 3, the environment you create. And 4, just self-awareness. And I think all 4 of those things, coaches, if you really spend some time on those, you would be super happy that you did. So, Mark, I know we're going to have you on again sometime to go even more in depth in all what you're learning to better coaches, because we want to steal all the things you get to see from 30,000 feet, getting out of the weeds and learning the things that we might not be learning in the weeds. So, hey, we really appreciate not only your friendship, but your willingness to share all the things that you're learning to be able to help coaches. So, coaches, if you got any thoughts, hit us up at Hardwood_hustle. If you got any questions, we can also pass those along to them. So let us know if you got any questions. But hey, he is Sam. I am TJ. We are the Hardwood Hustle.
Thanks again for tuning into this episode of the Hardwood Hustle, where we believe in the value of a coach. Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Hardwood_hustle to stay up to date on the latest episodes and share your thoughts with our coaching community. From the Hardwood Hustle team, thanks again. We can't wait to be with you again next week.